if you get in trouble during this podcast, I will call you Christine.
Christine.
So I want to welcome everybody to Branded Podcast. It's Stir Up Faith. See that clever cowboy reference there? This is a ministry of Crossroads Cowboy Church, and today we have, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I'm Christy Valise.
Christy Valise.
Yes.
And only Christine when you're mad.
Yeah, well, when I'm in trouble.
When you're in trouble.
Yes.
So it'd be Justine all the time for you.
No? I like that. Let's run with it.
Justin? No, okay. Well, anyway. So what I want to ask you and find out about you, and here's the thing. I don't really know a lot of people. I recognize your face, and we said hi before, but I don't know much about you. So why don't you go ahead and you just tell me, it's Christy Valise, and you are, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in northeastern Connecticut.
We forgive you.
Yes, we got out of there as soon as it was possible. It's a beautiful area in Connecticut. Everybody jokes around the politics are not great up there, but it is a beautiful area. We lived half an hour from the ocean, the beaches.
Nice.
The beaches in Rhode Island.
I got
we were right
in my
there.
Beaches are nice. Yeah.
The beaches are nice. They're cold, but they're nice.
Yeah.
So Steve and I both grew up there. I graduated high school. I graduated from UConn, up in Connecticut, and we started a family after we got married, and then we just decided it was time to get out of Connecticut. So we went.
Okay. I'm going to slow you down just a little bit. You grew up in Connecticut, and you had siblings.
I have one brother.
One brother, older or younger?
Younger.
And so you were the older sister.
Yes.
And your folks, do they still live up in Connecticut?
My father passed away when I was 7.
Okay.
My mom raised us, and she just recently moved here last year. So my mother and my brother are now living here in East Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, and so how old were you when you met your husband? And your husband's name is?
Steve.
Steve.
Yep.
Steve. Does he go by Steven, or is that just when you're mad at him?
That's just when I'm mad at him.
Okay.
Rumor has it he's head of the church's security team. I don't know if you can confirm or deny, but
I plead the fifth on that.
All right, just checking. Okay.
So him and I met in high school.
Okay.
I was 15 years old when we met, and we became friends.
Okay, what grade were you in at 15? Is that sophomore?
Sophomore, yeah.
Okay.
And we actually started taking classes together when he was a senior and I was a junior. And it kind of developed into a high school relationship, and the rest is history.
See, Justin, when you said
I'm glad you're finally introducing me now. Yes.
Well, I did mention you earlier, Justin.
Have you decided if I get to the job as co-host yet or not? I'm just curious. Do I get to be a co-host since I just hang out here anyway?
Okay, let's get back to Christy.
Okay. Anyway.
Changing the subject.
Yeah. So you met in high school. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So yeah, we met in high school. Both of us, we lived in separate towns. And the school system is set up very differently up north than it is down here. I lived half an hour, 45 minutes away from where he lived. But there was an animal science program at the high school that he went to.
And so that's where you met him. He was part of the projects there?
He was part of the animal science program in that high school.
Okay, he was the student, not the subject.
Correct.
I got it. Just checking.
I heard another story that he literally traded his car for a truck because you had a horse trailer that needed to be pulled. Is this correct?
Yes, he did. He traded his Mustang GT for a Dodge pickup because I needed to get my horse to the horse shows.
Was the horse at least a Mustang?
No.
Not even a Mustang.
Not even a Mustang.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, we hit it off, and we dated through college, and then got married 2 weeks after I graduated college.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kind of goal of the podcast is to help people articulate their journey to the cross, and when they stepped over that threshold of faith, as a believer in Jesus. So you graduated college, you married, what did you say, 2 weeks after that?
2 weeks after I graduated, yep.
Now, were you guys Christians at the time?
So I was raised, my grandfather was a Baptist pastor.
Okay.
A Northern Baptist. Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists are very different.
Okay.
I was raised going to church with him. I was raised he had a nursing home ministry, so I used to go with them.
Okay.
So I was raised in the faith, and he was a very faith-filled man. My grandmother also was a very faith-filled woman. So I had great people there to pour into me and build me up. But when you hit high school, you kind of sometimes hit that rebellious stage.
Now, you mentioned your grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So you've skipped a generation. What about your folks?
My mom was very faith-filled, but she struggled a lot after my dad passed away.
Oh.
So we spent a lot of time with my grandparents. We lived with my mom. My mom took care of us, but she went from being a stay-at-home mom to having to work full-time.
Wow.
To support us.
How old were you when your dad passed?
I was 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All
and my
right.
brother was 2. So we spent a lot of time with my grandparents.
But now I see.
Yes.
See.
And she's a very faith-filled woman. She's amazing. She was rock through all of it. But we spent a lot of time in my younger years with my grandparents because she was out working and doing what she had to do. So I grew up we were at church every Wednesday. We were at church every Sunday. We had Awanas. I was a part of Awanas. And then youth group, and we did Bible camps, and we were very involved. And then high school kind of came, and I just kind of turned my back, and it was more fun being out in the world and doing all the fun things than living how we should be living.
A lot of us have been there. Yeah,
Yes.
So high school, you tested the boundaries of what you actually believed, and it was you put it to the test to see how real it was.
Yes, I did, and it was Steve was not. Steve was raised Catholic.
Oh.
And I say he was raised Catholic. They were Christmas and Easter Catholics. So they didn't regularly go to church. He was not raised.
All right.
He'd never opened a Bible when we had met. So he was brand spanking new to it all. And when we were dating, I was not really living the way that I should have been living. So I didn't really expose him to that.
Yeah, it wasn't on your priority list.
Right.
All right.
But we really didn't start turning back around and coming back to the Lord until we left Connecticut and got to West Texas. It's kind of difficult to find a Holy Spirit filled church in the northern states.
Okay.
Where we lived in Connecticut, it was a very rural area.
All right.
There was not a lot of churches, and the churches that were there, they were a lot of non-denominational churches. And looking back now, I thought their messages were great, and I would go and I would listen, and I'd think, oh, they make great points, but there was not the Holy Spirit was not there. You could not feel the presence, and it just didn't hold any interest for me. So we just decided we're just not going to go to church.
So, describe to me when you say you couldn't feel the Spirit. What does that feel like?
So. Oh goodness, that's hard to explain.
Oh, I know it is. That's why I asked you.
It's kind of an overpowering feel of love, and it's something that you don't want to get away from. It's something that you just want to stay in and bask in, and I don't know how else to explain it. Just the love that you can feel when he's present and when he's in the room is just like it's unlike any other.
Do you think it could be that sense that you are where you belong?
Yes, I think that is a lot of
your
it.
experience and relationship that you were designed and made for.
Yes.
Okay.
I really believe that. So when we had moved to West Texas, we discovered our first cowboy church. To my knowledge, there's not any cowboy churches in Connecticut.
Wow, shocker.
I know, go figure. But we moved to West Texas, and there were cowboy churches on every corner. So we tried out a couple different churches because I had decided that with the change, there was just something inside me that was pulling me back, that I needed to turn around and go back to God.
So had the kiddos entered the picture at this point?
Yes, at this point, Lenny and Emily was 7 and Lenny was 2. And we were out there. I think a lot of it had to do with fear too, because we picked up and moved everything to West Texas. We knew no one. We had no family out there. we were surrounded by family and friends when we lived in Connecticut.
All right.
So it was the first time that we had ever really been by ourselves.
So the children, that describes a lot of your existence. So
Yes.
tell us about those first children that you have.
So Emily was born when I was 25.
Okay.
She's our first. And then Lenny came along 5 years later. And they're great kids. All of our kids are great kids, but they've been through the taking in, and I know we'll get into the foster kids and the adopted kids later, but to go through what they went through, having other kids come into the house and disrupt things and take over attention of mom and dad, they've been through a lot and they've handled it with grace. So they're really solid. They're great kids. I know I'm a little biased.
Your kids are good kids. Yes,
So you had children. Was it because of having children, you think, that there was more of a stir to get back to your foundation of faith?
I think that had a lot to do with it. I remember what it was like growing up, being surrounded by just spirit-filled people and having those morals instilled in me and the music being poured into me. My family background is they're very musical. I did not get that. But my grandfather sang, all my mom and all of my aunts and uncles sing, a lot of my cousins sing. They're very
Wow.
Yes, so I don't have that. But
Well, just so you know, I think this podcast will be instrumental
Oh, no,
for
no,
you.
no.
Instrumental for you.
I need some
Instrumental for
drums,
you.
please.
The Lord will use it as an instrument of His grace. There you go. How's
that's
that?
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. But yeah, it's something twisted there along the time that Lenny came along, and we really started wanting to get back into. I started wanting. Steve had never been exposed to it, so he didn't really know what he was missing.
Okay.
And he enjoyed cowboy church out in West Texas, but his job took him away frequently during church days.
What does he do?
So when we moved to Texas, he's kind of a jack of all trades.
Nice.
he is indeed.
I can relate to that.
Yes. When we lived in Connecticut, he started out, he did security detail at one of the big casinos in Connecticut. I don't know if you're familiar with Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun.
I know all the casinos. Go ahead.
Of course you do.
The only reason I say that is because they're the largest casinos in the world, and they're in Connecticut. So it's a little weird. But he started out as security detail there, and then he decided that was not a career for him, so he went into plumbing. And he became a journeyman for a local plumber in the area.
Really?
Yep, he did that for 12-ish years. But the economy kind of took a hit, and he was the only employee, so the employer decided it was time we needed to get shed of whatever they didn't absolutely have to have. And he still has a great relationship with him. It was no hard feelings. It was just a decision he had to make because of the economy. So he shifted and he went to work for a company that makes the big underground concrete pipes.
Okay.
So he did that for about 2 years. He did that until we moved to Texas.
So he's sounds like a very hands-on man,
Yes.
which I suppose that plays in pretty good when you're bringing in foster children. And
Yes.
I want to steer it that direction. So you have Emily and Lenny.
Emily and Lenny.
And then how long between Lenny and that brilliant idea you had to take strange children into your home?
So
when did that happen?
And how did that happen?
So we were actually in Texas, and I can pinpoint exactly when the seed got planted. In Connecticut, they don't talk a whole lot about foster care. It's not in your face.
Okay.
And when we moved to West Texas, it was very in your face. They had agencies. It was on billboards. It was everywhere.
Do you think it was because there was more of a need, or they were just more open to it?
I think they're just more open to it, because now that I look back and I have friends and family still in Connecticut, I can see it now that I know what to look for. But it was very open, and I had joked around all the time, 2 kids, that's the perfect number of kids. We're not going to have any more kids, if I had only known. So I was actually selling some baby clothes to the consignment store from Lenny. And I had gone in and I'm like, oh, all the baby things. I kind of caught baby fever, but I knew that I was not having any more children.
Right.
I did not want to have any more children. So the seed kind of just got planted. And I went home to Steve and I'm like, I think we need to foster. And he's like, no, we've got enough on our plates. At that point, he was working at the maximum security prison as a corrections officer. So
he said he has enough people to take care of.
Right. He deals with toddlers all day long. So I kind of did something I probably shouldn't have and went behind his back and signed us up for the classes anyway.
All right, let's just pause here. Breathe this in. You went behind your husband's back and made a decision.
I did. And he handled it with grace, which he does with all of my harebrained things. I told him about it the night before it started. He does better with the shock and awe than
short term to deal with it.
So he doesn't have to mull over it.
The night before, you have someone come into your home?
No, we started classes. It was an 8-week class that we had to take.
Okay.
And it was 3 nights a week. I made sure that I had set it up so he was not working on the nights that we were supposed to be there. And he went, and he gets very quiet when he's thinking about stuff. Steve's quiet. So I could tell that they had kind of hooked him.
Okay.
And he loves kids. He does love kids. So we had went to the classes, and I told him, I said, I'll fill out all the paperwork. I'll handle all the appointments. You just have to come so we can say that you were
That's
there.
a smart move. Yeah,
Yes.
very good. Very good.
So I took care of all the things, and we got certified. And when we got the phone call that we were officially certified, 2 hours later, we got a phone call for a placement.
2 hours.
2 hours.
Wow.
It was 2 hours. I literally got the phone call, and 2 hours later, they said, we're bringing you a little boy. So he was 2 years older than Lenny. So he was.
That's a tough first one.
It's tough, and he had lots of hard diagnoses. It was a tough situation. He was probably one of our hardest placements, and he was the first one out of the gate. So he was nonverbal. He had lots of stuff going on, and they're like, we're just going to break these people in. So he was a good kid. Steve got very attached very quickly, it's hard not to do, but he had an attachment disorder. So he wasn't even attached to his biological father. Like, he had no attachments to anybody.
Okay.
And he came into the house and immediately attached himself to Steve.
So
nice.
So when you take these classes and when you make this decision, fostering's different than adoption.
Yes.
So did you all go in this with the intention of just fostering those kids that need to be fostered for a short period of time?
That was our intention. Steve was very clear from the beginning, because I didn't know what I wanted this to turn into.
Right.
I just knew that there was a need, and I knew that we could meet that need. He was very adamant that we were the soft landing place for kids to get them situated until they could move on to whatever the next step was. He had no intentions of adopting, and really I hadn't even thought of adopting. I just knew that there were kids out there that needed a safe place and that we could do that. So the first one was tough. He ended up, we were getting ready to move here to East Tennessee, but we were kind of holding on picking the date when we were going to go, because we didn't know what was going to happen with this little boy. And then we got the word that he was going to go back to his biological father. And we worked really hard, and Dad was trying really hard. Like, it was a good situation.
Okay.
I felt pretty solid about this. So we started making the plans, because we had gotten a date of when they were going to transition him. And everything happened. They transitioned, and we moved to East Tennessee. I had stayed friends with the lady who ran the daycare that he was going to, so she could kind of give me updates on how he was doing. And because it's hard to raise him and love on him and then send him away and not ever hear anything again. So she had called me a couple weeks after we got here saying that it had fallen through. They were terminating rights on him. So I immediately contacted the caseworker in West Texas, and I said, we'll take him back. We'll get certified here. We'll take him back, and we'll adopt him. If they're going to terminate, then we'll. Okay. And my husband Steve was he was adamant that this is what we were going to do. And he was still living in Texas at the time. He had moved us here, but he was waiting to get hired on with the sheriff's department here, and they have hiring time. So he had gone back to West Texas. He was going to work a couple months and then move. So he went to the once a week. He went to the daycare and visited him. And he asked. He had started talking when he was with us. He asked for Steve all the time. And it ended up just falling through. And they ended up moving him without telling anybody, and he was placed through, I don't know if it's U.S. Kids or Adopt Kids or whatever that big program is in the United States.
That's disappointing because there's so many hoops to jump through.
There is. And they were telling us that it would be a minimum of 6 months before they could move him to us, which I think is why they were rushing for permanency. And I understand that permanency is important. So, and we had to, we couldn't speed up the process here. We had to do the 6 to 8 weeks here and then do all the in-home visits and all that.
How common is it for states to cooperate in those type of situations?
It's really hard.
That's kind of
it's a minimum of a 6-month wait, and that's if everything goes perfectly and you have caseworkers who are on it, which it's hard because the caseworkers are all overloaded right now. So for them to complete things the minute they come across their desk is not often because they've got so much coming across their desk.
You know, I have a few of my own fostering situations. When I might have been 10, 11, my older brother's 12, maybe. And I've got an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister. So, and we were like a year and a half apart. So we're pretty close in age. But my mom had she had a heart to do the very same thing. And so she had friends who are having trouble with their 16-year-old son, Brian. And so we fostered him. He just moved in with us. And so the dynamics of, my older brother, he was on the top of the totem pole. Now he's been knocked down a few things. And Brian was he had a lot of problems and it was quite wild and stuff. So that was a time that was somewhat difficult. In fact, we would wrestle in the front yard. We liked having a big guy around. We'd wrestle in the front yard, and he'd throw us around. And I've got a permanent chipped tooth because he took me and tossed me into my brother's head, and I lost my tooth. And since then, I've had root canals because it killed the other ones next to it and stuff. So I've got permanent memories of just what can happen. Brian we had horses, and he would get the horses drunk, and it's just it was quite something. But the only other foster thing that I remember is when my wife and I were first married. 6 months into it, I think it was, there was a kid who was having trouble at home, 14 years old, and he moved across the state of Washington and moved in with us. So that was our first thing as newlyweds, fostering a young man in his teenage years. And so my hat and heart are out to you, what you have to go through when you have somebody who's not genetically linked to you and has already been, they have a foundation that doesn't necessarily line up with how you interact in life. And it's a tough one.
It's hard. A lot of them have a foundation of trauma, and that can change into many different things. I mean, we've had 13 kids come through our home through foster care.
Wow.
In a 7-year period. When we moved here in Texas, we had only had 2, and they were single foster kiddos. We moved here and we got the phone call that we were certified, and 4 hours later, they don't waste any time.
Wow.
4 hours later, we got a phone call for 3 kids, a sibling group of 3. And they try very hard to keep the siblings together because they're already going through so much by being removed from their families, that they do the best they can to keep the siblings together. But often it's not possible and they have to separate. A lot of people want the younger ones, and the older ones are the ones that suffer for it. But we decided to take in a sibling group of 3, and the church was instrumental in helping us out with that. We had already become involved in Crossroads Cowboy Church.
Okay.
And they were a huge help to us, just with support and helping babysit so I could run kids back and forth to appointments, because we went from a family of 4 to a family of 7 overnight.
That's what I was going to ask was, I know when I first started coming to Crossroads Cowboy Church, one of the first exciting things that happened in one of the services is that you all were getting to adopt,
Johnny.
Yeah. And so it was becoming official, and everybody was excited, and it was obvious that you had full support of the church. And So when you got to Tennessee, how quick did you all get, and did you purposely look for a cowboy church?
So I purposely looked for a cowboy church. Steve had gone back to Texas, and it was a stronger fire inside of me to get into a church family. And I think it was the Lord preparing me, because he knew what we were going to take on with all these foster kids, and he knew how important it was for not just for us to have that godly foundation, but how important it is for them to be introduced to that godly foundation, because it makes a huge difference in their lives. So I had Googled cowboy churches because I loved our cowboy church back in West Texas. And the closest one was in Morristown. And I'm like, I don't know this area.
So let me interrupt you here. Just out of curiosity, what is it about the texture or flavor of a cowboy church that would be attractive to you and your husband?
So my husband, not so much. He doesn't care either way, as long as he was being interested, as long as he was drawn into it. He didn't really care what the texture. The
then how for like. You? What?
I grew up riding horses. And when my dad passed away, that became my outlet. Like my aunt took me in, and she had horses on the property, and I know it was just to distract me and get me out from under my mom's feet, but it became a passion. And all through high school, and then I got my own horse in college, and I started showing regularly. So it was, the horses has always been a thing. And I joke with Steve, because Steve is not a horse fan, which it's hilarious that he's even in a cowboy church.
Could be an expensive hobby.
Yes. We won't talk about his expensive hobbies.
Oh my. Well, that's true.
But, I joke with him all the time. I'm like, when we met that I was a horse person, so that's
he literally
on you.
traded his car.
He did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's...
Which, that kind of explains why you head up the saddle club here at the church.
Yes.
So.
Yep. Horses is... It was a very strong passion of mine for a long time. And when Emily was born, she kind of caught the horse bug, they say. So her and I would do shows together, even as a little one. She was 2 years old out in the show ring. So I was excited to have something that I could share with my daughter. And even now she loves the horses. She loves to show, and it was something that we could share together. Something that I'm thankful that we had. Yeah,
and I can relate to the equestrian flavor of things. We had horses when I was growing up too, and you'd spend a lot of time in there. You become buddies with the horses and stuff, and when the vet would deworm the horses, your folks would deworm you and that kind of thing.
I don't know if I ever had that happen to me.
Oh,
we'll
I was a different kid, but I wish it wasn't true. But anyway, so go on from there. Getting landed here in a cowboy church.
Yep. So we had made, I had found a little mountain church, and I can't even remember the name of it. I don't even know if I could tell you how to get there now. But I had found this tiny little mountain church, and we had gone and tried it out. And the people were so nice. But I was the youngest one by probably 40 years. And I had two very young children.
Oh my.
They didn't have any children's stuff because they didn't have any kids. So they like surrounded us and just loved on us because they were so excited to have visitors and have kids in the church. And they had invited me to, the next weekend was going to be their, it was going to be their 100-year anniversary for the church. So they had made me promise that I was going to come out because they were doing a big cookout and they were going to do all this stuff. And so I said, absolutely. But I told them, I said, I've not made a decision. I'm still going to go visit a couple other churches, but I'll come out for the anniversary. And as we were driving to the anniversary service, I drove past the sign for the first service at Crossroads Cowboy Church. And I was like, I didn't even know there was a cowboy church out here. Wow. And I looked at the kids and I said, next week, that's where we're going. So we already committed to this week, but we are going.
Saddle up. We're going there next week.
So, and it's just, that's where it started.
It had been here for 3 or 4 years before I realized there was even a cowboy church in Greenville. I'd never even heard of a cowboy church. And, it was our kids that got us drawn in. They had some friends who were going and they got invited. And of course, when your kids are excited about something, you need to go check it out because there's one or two things going on here. We need to figure out why they're so excited. And it was because of just the environment and the wonderful people. And so that's how we got into the cowboy church, which it was at the skating rink at the time when we started coming.
Right.
So you were in the fostering thing, you'd found a new church, and then you said overall you'd fostered like 13 kids?
Yep, we fostered 13 children. The first sibling group that we took here in Tennessee, they actually the oldest one. So when they had come into our home, they were 4, 2, and 1.
Okay.
And then Lenny was also 4 at the time, so I had 4 kids 4 and under, which was a little crazy.
Yeah.
And the oldest one ended up needing open heart surgery while she was with us. So that was interesting. I've never had kids in my home that had major medical problems before. And recovery from the surgery was a little intense. But I was happy that we were able to be that place. We pray a lot. When we get the phone call, the first thing I do is I stop and pray, Lord, are we the ones that are supposed to take in these kids? And he has been awesome with answering me, because it's a very quick, like they want an answer, because if you can't, they're going to move on to the next one. So he was always awesome at letting me know right away, yes or no, this is the one, or this is not the one. But we also pray when things start to happen in their biological family's life, and we're starting to get a glimpse of what permanency for them is going to look like. So if it looks like there's going to be a termination of rights on the parents and that they're going to come up for adoption, we start praying, Lord, are we the ones that are supposed to be adopting these kids, or is there another family out there that's meant for them?
And so you've adopted some that you fostered.
We have adopted some.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's wild. Steve had still decided when we had that sibling group of 3 here in Tennessee that adoption was not for us. And I was okay with that. I had not felt the Lord prompt me to say this is not going anywhere. Until we got the phone call for Johnny. Johnny was 5 weeks old when I got the phone call.
Wow.
She had gone home with her mom from the hospital, even though she tested positive for meth. She spent 5 weeks in a tool shed until the state found out what was going on. And then they came and they removed her.
Okay, so that's at the parents'
yes,
place. Not your place.
Not my place.
I thought you had a filtering process. That
No.
Okay, just checking.
Quarantine.
Clarifying.
No. She had gone home with her mom, and that's the harsh reality of homelessness and the drug epidemic that's going on. Her and her mother and her father were living in a tool shed in the back of someone's yard.
Wow.
So the state had found out about it, and they picked her up, and they started calling around. And it's funny because I had been praying, Lord, I've not had any babies yet. Like, I really felt drawn to the toddlers. Toddlers was my thing. But I really wanted to experience having
fostering
a baby.
Fostering a baby. Okay.
So I was out doing some work on some horses for a friend, and I had gone through an area where I didn't have service. And when I hit an area that did, I saw I had a voicemail. And we knew our home was open for kids. We currently didn't have any kids in the home, so I assumed that that's probably what it was, because there were days where we got 8, 9, 10 calls a day for different kids. So I called them back, and they explained that they had a 5-week-old, and before they even finished the whole description, I was like, we'll take her, just don't even give her to anybody else, we'll take her. And I tore into the driveway, and I'm yelling at everybody, get in the car, we have to go pick up our baby. And my husband was like, what are you talking about?
Kudos to Steve for staying calm.
That seems like a pretty precarious ledge to be on, because the possibility of getting so entwined in love with a little baby, I mean, that's risky.
It's hard, and we actually ran into that. The Lord showed up. I mean, he's been with us through the whole journey, but we were spiritually in a place that we were the strongest that we'd ever been spiritually. Okay. And I knew she had some medical stuff going on because of the drug exposure. And I knew because she had just been removed, they hadn't had a great amount of time to try to find, they always try to find family that would be willing to take in the child before they decide permanency in a foster care home. And 2 weeks after we had her, which was, I mean, with a newborn, you bond almost immediately because they're helpless and they're just awesome. Not that all the kids aren't awesome, but
Right.
there's something different about a newborn because there's nothing they can do for themselves.
No, because the other kids have somewhat of a foundation.
Yes.
When you have a newborn, I can imagine that you now are their foundation,
Yes.
which makes a huge difference.
Yes. And we had gotten a phone call 2 weeks into having her, stating that they were having a meeting. So I found a babysitter for all the kids and I went to the meeting, not even know, like I was sitting in the office and the people that I was sitting next to didn't know who I was. I didn't know who they were. But it was family of hers.
Okay.
And they were told that they were going to get her. So they were talking about it in front of me and I had not a clue.
Oh,
so
man.
I'm trying not to panic. And I start praying, Lord, I knew when I picked her up that she was not going anywhere. And I'm like, Lord, you've got to do something. And I had heard them talking about how one of them passed the background check. So when they got her, she was going to take her and give her to the one that didn't pass the background check.
Oh.
And I was like, we can't do this. So we went into the meeting and it was broached that this is what was going to happen. And I voiced my concerns and I contacted the caseworker afterwards and they're like, listen, there's nothing we can do. What they decide to do with her after she's released to their custody is up to them. Like it was I was like a mess. So I went home and I called Jen and I called all of the people at church. I'm like, I need you guys to pray because I need her to be wherever the Lord needs her to be. The next day, the person who passed the background check that was supposed to be taking her came into the office and said, listen, I'm 8 months pregnant. I don't want to take on a newborn and I don't think she should be going to these other people. Can you please just lie to my family and say that I didn't pass the background check. There was a mistake. So
Wow.
it was, I knew it was the Lord. I knew the Lord had showed up in this and everything after that, like all of Johnny's medical problems just started disappearing. And like we joke around because she was the church baby. She was the first infant in the church. Yeah. And I would walk onto the property and I wouldn't see her again until I was ready to leave.
I remember those days.
Okay, let's fast forward just a little bit. So you've experienced, the fostering and then eventual adoption of a little baby. Had some drug issues at the start and family issues and things. So you decided to make that leap to 4 more.
Well,
explain how that happened.
So that is one of my biggest foster care testimonies because that was one of the few times that I audibly heard the Lord.
Really?
Yes. So
Did he sound like me?
No.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Sorry, Christy.
So I had gotten the phone call and they're like, we have 4 kids. We're trying to place them all together.
All siblings.
All siblings, yep. And I didn't even, normally I pray about it and I'm like, just give me a second. And I'm 4. What am I going to do with 4 kids? I had already had 3.
Right.
So we're going to go from 5 to 9. And I was like, no, I can't. I don't have the place to put them. Like in my head, logistically, this was not ever going to work.
Yeah.
So my knee-jerk reaction was, no, we cannot. And I even told her, I said, call me back if you decide to separate and I can take 2, but I cannot take on 4.
So what were the ages when they first contacted you?
They were 11, 3, 2, and 1.
Well, that's quite a spread.
1, 2, and 3, and then
11. Yeah. So I hung up the phone and I heard him say, you made a mistake. And I was like, Lord, you've got to be kidding me. And so in my head, I'm trying to figure this out. And I'm like, well, I'll call Steve. Because if I tell Steve 4 kids, he's going to shut me down. And then it's not on me. It's on him. And I don't have to worry about
That's wise. That's a wise move.
All right, Steve's up. Now what happens?
So I call him and I'm like, here's the deal. I just got a call for 4 kids. And I told him the ages. And he goes, let's do it. And I'm like, oh my goodness. He didn't even hesitate.
Really?
So I called up our friend Chad because Chad is always kind of the one who, when we get in a big group of kids, he brings pizzas and like he'll pick up
part of your support system.
Yeah, he'll pick up fun stuff for the kids because the day that they come to the house is always a scary day for them.
Yeah.
So he tries to bring some fun into it to kind of alleviate some of that. So I called him and told him, and he was so excited, and I'm the only one over here panicking because I'm like, what are we going to do? And these kids came in and they were so scared. And it broke my heart to know we had not ever had a kiddo older than 8.
Okay.
So this was
you had a
uncharted territory.
preteen.
Yes.
Oh,
It was very uncharted territory. And most of our kiddos, we'd only had one kid that was not a toddler. So a lot of times the toddlers, they know something is going on, but the fear, that really core fear, is not there. And it was, when you're 11, you know what's going on. There's
They were put in foster care. Was it because their parents weren't around, or because they were in trouble?
It was drug issues, which is, I want to say, almost every single kiddo we've had has been some sort of drug issue.
Both were in jail. One was in jail. What was the situation?
I believe one was on their way to jail. There was some issues with providing safe housing. The system had been involved in their lives for a good majority
a long
of it.
time.
Yeah.
All right.
And it was just finally, it was decided that not enough headway was being made and that these kids weren't safe. Actually, Carter and Carson were caught walking around in downtown Kingsport by themselves. So that, and they were 2 and 3.
I got to ask, are they aware? Are you kids aware of the story? Okay,
yes.
Yes. I want
to. No, we're very open with. And I mean, we explain things in a manner that is appropriate for their age. But they're aware of the parents. We get a lot, especially when they first come in. Why can't I be with my mom and dad? Why do I have to be here? And my go-to answer has always been, listen, mom and dad are not in a place right now where they can keep you safe.
Okay.
So we're going to keep you safe here until the courts determine what's going to happen. But we're going to make sure that you stay safe. That's always been the goal, is to make sure that they feel safe, because a lot of times these kids have not ever felt safe.
Yeah.
And it's very, it's sad. It's a scary place to be for them, not knowing what's going on. And the other weird thing is, a lot of this stuff is normal for them. Like, this is all they've ever known. And it blows my mind. Like, it was normal for them to not ever have a pair of shoes. And I had taken the 3 younger ones into the grocery store, which was wild, by myself. And they'd not ever been into a store before. Wow. And to walk into Walmart, you would have thought that we were at Disney World. Like, they just could not believe all of the stuff in one place. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got 9 kids then?
I have 7 kids.
7 kids.
7 kids,
so,
yeah.
And I'm not being prophetic or anything. I'm just
no.
Your house is closed now.
Our house is closed. Yes.
Okay. All right. What does that look like for you and your husband coming to church with a complete family that the Lord has blessed you with, a family that wouldn't be, and you've changed the course of their history? What does that feel like for you? It's
overwhelming. We actually just 2 days ago celebrated Gotcha Day for the 4 that we were just talking about. It was February 27th was the day 5 years ago. February 27th is when they came to us. And I try not to make a huge hype about the day that they come into the home, because the 2 that remember it was not great memories. Yeah. But we do, what do you guys want special for dinner? We'll go out to eat. We'll do something with our friends, the people who surrounded us and supported us during that tough time. But to look back and to think about and talk about how far they've come, and the firm foundation that they have in the Lord, when Carla was really the only one who'd ever even heard about the Lord. And that was because she had a grandmother who poured into her while she was where she was. The other 3 had they'd never been exposed to it. So to see how far they've come and the changes they've made, and people joke around all the time. They remember the first time they came to church, it was like wild animals scattering everywhere while we were trying to herd them up. But it's so awesome to see what the Lord has done.
Yeah.
Because it really, all we've done is given them a safe place to be. We've loved on them and we've exposed them to the Lord. And that is every single time we've had the opportunity to expose a kiddo to the Lord, we see awesome changes.
Well, it's interesting to know that human failure is opportunity for human fulfillment.
Yes.
You get a fulfilled family life. Unfortunately, there was no doubt sin and failure of bad decisions, but you're the benefactor of a God who is the God of new beginnings.
Exactly.
That's wonderful.
So I guess my question would be, and it's going to be intertwined, is what kind of role did your faith play with fostering, and what kind of role did fostering play, in your faith, and how did those?
I truly believe that fostering has helped grow our faith, because it's put us in situations where we never would have survived what we've been through without the Lord there and us leaning on the Lord and just thinking of all of the different things that we've prayed for over these kids and their family connections and all these things, and to watch them come to fruition, that in and of itself is a faith builder. And I'm just, it really hit me hard when we first started fostering how important it was to expose these kids to the Lord. And it surprised me because I grew up being exposed to the Lord, and our whole family was in ministry, and it was odd to me that there are kids out there who've never even heard about God.
Yeah.
They didn't even know that there was a God. And I thought, what a shame to know that these kids don't even have a clue that there's a Lord out there that loves them so much and wants the best for them and is going to protect them through this scary time.
Yeah.
And it brought it to my mind that we're not doing this to feel good. And we are doing this to help these kids, but it's a ministry.
Yeah.
We're not only keeping them safe, but we're giving them a foundation that is not going to leave them for the rest of their lives.
It's an eternal foundation.
Yes.
When you shared how we're a little bewildered that people haven't heard about Jesus. Well, I did some work in India. I went over Gospel for Asia, and at the time it was K.P. Yohanan who was in charge of it, and he shared that feel your pulse, put your fingers on there. In the 1040 window, that's the area of India, every time you feel the pulse, another person dies without ever even knowing there's a Jesus, never even heard the name. And it's like, oh. Yeah. So I can see for you how that would be just, you have made an eternal difference by your choices. And I think that's a great place to wrap up here. But what I'm going to do, I'm showing you, Justin.
Okay.
See that pretty face? Okay. We're not going to end on that face. And we're not going to end on this face. We're going to end on this face, because I've just been thrilled by the joy that just oozes out of your pores, because you've been faithful to do what God has asked you to do, and you've reaped a benefit, 100-fold. And I think it's a wonderful testimony. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Before we go.
All right.
Is there any words of encouragement or any resources or anything you'd like to mention to folks who are in the foster community, the adoptions, any folks who are needing help or interested in getting involved? Do you have any kind of things you could mention? So
what I tell people all the time, and I've been out to different churches and I've spoken about foster care, if you're not called to it, don't do it, because it's hard. And this really needs to be something that the Lord is calling you to, because if the Lord's not in it, it's going to be rough. So the main thing is pray about it. Make sure that this is where you want to go and that we're doing it for the right reasons. But the other thing is, if you're in it, or if you know that the Lord is calling you to this, make sure that you're plugged into your church.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are part of a community of God-loving people that will surround you and back you, because I can't imagine having to walk this journey without my church family surrounding me and being there for us.
Awesome.
Amen
Great
to
words.
that.
Great
So
words.
if you want to just mention to them that if they want to leave a comment,
Absolutely.
and you'll be reading them too, a comment, or if they want to subscribe. I mean, you say it much better. Can you just, if you want to subscribe for further podcasts?
If you want to subscribe to further podcasts, just hit the little subscribe button underneath.
Oh,
Awesome.
you're a natural.
See? I might be out of a job now. Okay.